House Committee on Labor will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Hadsma.
Here.
Representatives Menser.
Here.
Colzar.
Here.
O'Neill. Andrews.
Here.
Churches.
Here.
Wagella.
Here.
Wozniak.
Here.
Mueller.
Here.
Koontz.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the June 8, 2023 Labor Committee hearing? Denise Menser makes that motion. Minutes are adopted. We're here this morning to take testimony on House Bill 4497 and Senate Bill 185. I'd like to invite Senator Jeff Irwin and Representative Kerry Reingans up to present those bills. Also, I understand Janelle Mansfield from AFT will be participating soon after their testimony. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I am Rep. Kerry Reingans, and I'm here to discuss House Bill 4497, which would repeal the part of Michigan's Public Employee Relations Act that prohibits grad student research assistants and student athletes from being able to collectively bargain. Both student athletes and grad student research assistants, or GSRAs, are students themselves, and while they're trying to learn, they're also providing labor to the researchers and athletic departments at their institutions. GSRAs contribute the research for which their principal investigator, or PI, may go on to use for publication and advance their own tenure if they're on tenure track. And this is real work that GSRAs are doing at their own institutions. Working conditions for GSRAs can be really tough. During undergrad, not grad school, was a research assistant working in a developmental biology lab, and I was a grad student instructor when I was in graduate school. It was always confusing that grad student instructors could organize, but not research assistants, even though they were grad students like us providing labor to the institution. And sometimes I remember thinking when I was a research assistant myself, some of these hours and working conditions were really not great, and I really wish I could have been able to organize as well. I was considered an employee, though, because I was part-time and an undergrad. So in addition to the pay and benefits that GSRAs may be able to receive for their work, sometimes it's still not enough to be able to live in the towns where they are located. So I live in Ann Arbor. I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and a GSRA working at the University of Michigan right now makes about $24,000 for a master's student for 8 months of work, and $36,000 for PhD students for 12 months of work. And the average rent of a one-bedroom apartment in Ann Arbor right now is almost $1,900 a month. That was as of May. So that's almost 2/3 of their paycheck is on rent. So that is completely an unlivable wage. This bill also, the House bill also allows student athletes to organize. The reason they're even called student athletes is because they are students and they are also athletes. Colleges and universities, as we know, make money off these athletes' labor, and they bring in a lot of value to the universities themselves. And as we see with GSRAs, the work of being an athlete can interfere with the student part of being there on campus. And I know that we have made some progress in our country and our school and our state here, working for name, image, and likeness statutes. It's really great for those few students who will be able to secure those contracts. Thousands of student athletes in Michigan, though, which are the vast majority, they will not be able to secure NIL contracts. And so they won't be able to receive any of the value or be able to have better working conditions for the work that they're putting in for their institutions. So as a legislature, we have made clear that we support labor and that we have the backs of working people. And this bill is an extension of the labor protections we've already passed into law this session. I was a member of AFT Locals 3550 and 6244 when I was at the University of Michigan, and I know my former union also sees the work we're doing to protect labor and working people in Michigan. So I look forward to answering questions, and I urge you to vote yes on 4497.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Chair Hadsma and to all the members of the committee for taking some time to consider this legislation this morning. Rep. Reingans, I think, did a great job covering a lot of the ground, but my involvement with this issue starts with a little bit of my personal history in this chamber. When I was a member of the House of Representatives about 8 years ago, there was an effort at the University of Michigan among these graduate research assistants to organize. They had gotten together. Their employer, the University of Michigan, was preparing to support their unionization effort at a hearing with the Michigan Employment Relations Commission. And what happened was that this legislature very quickly adopted a bill to just simply stipulate in law that people who do this job are not quote-unquote employees. And the reason that was done was to prevent this particular unionization drive at this particular workplace. Now, when you look at what graduate research assistants do, their work is the sort of work that you expect from an employee. They have a boss who tells them where to go, where to be, what to do. They show up for work every day. They provide real value to the institution, developing innovation and research that could be life-saving or job-creating. And so they look like employees to me. And once again, when I was here in the legislature before, there was just a simple effort by the legislature to stipulate in law that they're not employees, even though otherwise they look just like employees. So now we have this weird situation where graduate student instructors and lecturers at the university are able to unionize, and they're considered employees under Michigan law, but these research assistants who are working in labs, not classrooms, are not considered employees just because of a simple stipulation that was really born out of a political moment. Okay, so when this year started up, I thought, you know what, I need to go back. I need to propose a bill that will restore order to this situation. Let's call these employees employees. Let's allow them, if they choose, to work with their employers and organize, just like they were trying to do 10 years ago when they were beat to the sort of courtroom steps at Merck by this legislature and our former governor. So that's the backstory of how I got here. And the only other thing I would add to the excellent explanation that Rep. Reiningans gave is that these research assistants are in a particularly challenging position vis-a-vis some other employees because Rep. Reiningans mentioned their PI, their principal investigator, essentially their boss, essentially maybe the lab director in a lot of circumstances. When we talk about what these research assistants are doing, they are often working on cutting edge, like significant research on a worldwide scale. And there might only be 5 or 10 people in the whole world that are working on this particular thing, and they all know each other. So they are very, they're in a very sensitive position vis-a-vis their boss. Their boss has tremendous influence over the future of their career in ways that is more true in this setting than in almost any other. And so I just a little particular angle to what these folks face that I think is what led them, at least that's what they told me, is what led them in part to start organizing in addition to the typical things around wages and benefits that the employees always care about. So thank you for the opportunity, Chair Heidsma.
Thank you, Representative Reingens and Senator Irwin. We have a question from Representative Kolazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I'm curious, and I honestly don't know the answer to this. What is the justification for not allowing GSRAs to organize? What, if I were to ask somebody on the other side of the coin, why is this a bad idea? I'd love to hear what their justification is.
At the time, there wasn't a lot of debate. It was just, we've got the votes, let's move on. It was anti-union. There was a wave of anti-union legislation that was moving through, and this was one of them. That's the only explanation I can give you.
Okay. Thanks.
Representative Churches.
Thank you. So both here in Education Committee, I've heard things, we've heard testimony from temp workers about what we call substitute teachers. As a teacher, I usually refer to my substitute teachers as guest teacher, not a sub. I find the vocabulary of temp worker, of like calling someone temporary, also to be something not very respectful. And when you mentioned these individuals are not employees, it's just like making connections for me of we have people who are performing tasks, they are completing work, and they are contributing value to our society. So the way in which we label and we talk about people, it actually matters, and it makes citizens feel valued and respected and like they belong somewhere. So I just wondered, and I don't know the backstory, but I think it's very interesting. Why do you think these individuals weren't valued enough to be considered employees if they were performing work. What do you think? Who do you think that benefits, or what purpose do you think that served?
Look, I'm really not the right person to answer this because I voted no on the bill at the time.
Yeah.
And I've already probably gone too far in trying to characterize the motivations of people whose minds I'm not inside of, right? All I can say is at the time, there was a thoroughgoing effort to, make it more difficult to organize, make it more difficult for unions to exist. And what I saw in real time was a group of people who were employees in a precarious position saying, you know what, we need to band up and organize so we can make sure we protect ourselves and our friends and our coworkers. And the legislature raced to pass a bill very, very quickly out of the regular order because they knew that if that group got to the Merck hearing before the legislature passed its law and Snyder signed it, that the game would be over. And so it moved very, very quickly at the time.
I have a question. As I understand it, there's no longer student athletes part of the Senate version, Senator Irwin. Perhaps Representative Reingans or Senator Irwin, you might describe what's happening in terms of reconciliation of the two bills.
I chose to maintain the removal of student athletes as excluded employees because I believe that the labor that they produce for the universities and institutions is important to recognize as labor. I understand that this may make it more difficult for people to vote in favor. I am open to amendments on this, and if it does get amended out, I may come back separately in the future to advocate for this in this time. So we have talked about that difference. Do you want to add anything?
I would just say my goal from the very beginning was to right the wrong that I had personally witnessed happen. At least that's my description of it. And so that's why I was focused on the research assistants. Also, I do think that they are, they're different discussions. They're, just like any different type of employee group, they all have different concerns and different sort of flavors that they bring to the table. So I really wanted to focus on the research assistants because of the history that I had with the issue.
Thank you. Representative Menser.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the legislative analysis, and one of the groups that are not considered public employees and weren't granted collective bargaining or representation rights is individuals classified as independent contractors. Can you guys give us some examples of that?
I mean, look, I think this goes, this is a sweeping issue across the economy, and I don't think it's particularly related to what we're trying to do in this bill. But there are all sorts of situations where there are independent contractors that are bona fide independent contractors. Maybe you've got somebody who, is in the trades and is has their own business and is working with several different contractors that and is doing some work on a variety of projects. That would be, I think, a good example of someone who might be a more bona fide, properly classified independent contractor. Then you have these other situations where, I think FedEx is a great example. They look like employees, they wear the uniform, they get deployed by the company, they have to rent the company truck with the company logo on it. They don't work for anybody else, but the company classifies them as independent contractors because by doing so, there are tax benefits and other benefits, other legal benefits for the company. And the practical result of that is that other employers across the state who are actually following the rules faithfully end up having to pick up the freight for them with things like unemployment insurance and workers' compensation and those kinds of issues, right? So there's classification abuse is rampant across our economy. It is one way that business owners who are, I would say, less scrupulous are able to be subsidized by business owners who are more scrupulous, and it's pervasive in tons of sectors. But it's not. It certainly doesn't relate to graduate research assistants or student athletes, I don't think.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really have a huge problem with the grad assistants. My issue comes with student athletes. How many of those athletes are on scholarship? I mean, they're getting some type of tuition assistance. They're on scholarship. Mm-hmm. It's an honor to be able to play college sports. I mean, are we going to get rid of amateur sports altogether? Because then what happens? Are like U of M football team going to go on strike? I don't understand why that piece is in here, and I think that should be brought up separately.
So as you remember, and you know we're very well as a member of the Labor Committee, there are multiple things upon which you can negotiate contracts and labor agreements, right? And compensation is one, but there are other things that we can talk about. Working conditions, for example, two-a-days and interfering with exams and other things like that might be working conditions that are really untenable for students. So that's part of why I think that student athletes would benefit from having negotiation power over their working conditions.
I guess we'll agree to disagree on this because I mean, if you're a student athlete and you're getting an education through the University of Michigan, you know, from either your skills in playing hockey or baseball or football, you are getting paid by your tuition and room and board and all that. So I don't understand. I mean, that's based on personal ability. I mean, I couldn't play hockey at University of Michigan. I wasn't good enough, right? So then I don't go there. So I think we're going down a slippery slope with that. I mean, the grad assistants, I can give you a little leeway on that, and that'll be something I'll have to think about. But I think, you know, having student athletes being able to unionize is not the right thing because it takes away, you know, the amateur aspect of it. I mean, if they're going to be pros, then pay them. But they're not. They're getting paid through scholarship. And I guess I'm just a little old school because I don't even think pros should be in the Olympics, but that's a whole nother story. But I think your argument for this would be a little bit stronger if you just got rid of the student athletes.
Right, as I said, I'm open to amendments for this particular bill, but I do believe that student athletes should be considered employees with negotiating power for especially their working conditions.
Representative Colasar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, in terms of student athletes, have there been any documented cases where student athletes were unable to pursue the degree they wanted to pursue because of the demands placed on them by their coaches, who also, I think it's fair to say, athletic programs, especially in the big sports like football and basketball, make a ton of money, and then you're restricting the ability of the student athlete to actually pursue the degree they want to. Does that happen?
So I will say, I don't actually know where data exists that would track that. So I can't say that there is documented evidence of this the way that you just asked. Having been an undergrad and grad student at the University of Michigan, being friends with multiple student athletes, I have heard from them that they were strongly discouraged from choosing certain majors that had certain lab hours or that required certain kinds of lab work that would require them to have extensive hours doing certain things for classwork where they couldn't, where that would interfere with their practice schedules. And of course, the practice schedules are prioritized, unfortunately. They're not athlete students, they're student athletes.
Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are exactly two sports in NCAA that make money. Division I men's basketball, Division I football. Every other sport in Division I, Division II, NAIA, junior college, every other sport loses money. And they are subsidized by those two sports. So we're going to unionize teams, you know, those are the only two that make money. And they pay for everybody else. How are we going to justify this to the teams that are already being subsidized? Everybody, you're already getting the benefit of a degree. You get to register for classes first. You get special tutoring. Having firsthand knowledge of Division I sports, the student athletes, they get to register for classes first before anybody else. You know, they get preferential treatment. If anything, we're going to make it worse. I'm going to echo Representative Mueller. This is not a good portion of the bill.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you both. Janelle Mansfield from Michigan American Federation of Teachers. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for the opportunity to testify. I have a statement from one of our members who is a GSRA, and I'll read it out a little bit more about her experience and why she feels it's important they gain the right to organize. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak before this committee. My name is Ava Hill, and I'm a fifth-year graduate student and worker at Michigan State University. In my first year, I was a teaching assistant, and after that, I became a research assistant at the Facility for Rare Isotopes, where I've worked for the past 4 years. One of the most dramatic differences between my teaching assistant and research assistant positions was the workload. At MSU, both TAs and RAs are most commonly appointed as half-time employees, with the appointment letter specifying that the expectation is an average of 20 hours per week. As a TA, that workload was contractually enforced. When TAs are asked to work significantly more than they are paid for, the union can file a grievance on their behalf and either get some of the work reassigned or get the TA an increase in compensation for the additional hours worked. But as an RA, because we are not allowed to unionize, we don't have any protections like that. In the physics and astronomy department where I work, RAs are generally expected to contribute as full-time employees, even though our contracts are only for 20 hours per week. I know many RAs in my own and other departments whose advisors expect them to work far more than even that, sometimes upwards of 60 hours per week or more. I don't know any RAs that actually work 20 hours per week. At one point, I was appointed briefly as an hourly employee for technical reasons. During this time, my hourly wage was set, so they had to work a full 40 hours to receive the same pay as I would a normal RA stipend, which again is supposedly for 20 hours per week of work. This just isn't an unwritten rule that RAs should work more. It is very clearly the expectation that we are at least full-time employees. I've also heard from my international graduate student colleagues that this puts their immigration status at risk, since they are legally not allowed to work more than 20 hours per week, regardless of the expectations of the employer puts in place. We have no legal recourse for any of this because of the way the law is right now. We can't form a union, we can't file a grievance, we're just supposed to accept it. Ultimately, the work that we do as RAs is work. It is work that betters our universities. In addition to scientific research, part of my job includes maintaining the cryogenic cooling system for a high purity geranium detector we use at the FRIB. Two of my colleagues and I rotate weekly who will be on call and take the pager for 24/7 emergency maintenance of that system. That means 1 out of every 3 weeks, I am on call 24/7 for my supposedly half-time job. I've twice assembled and once disassembled a world-class gamma ray detector called Gratina, so it could be transported to and from the FRIB. That process takes weeks each time, and that detector wasn't even used in my thesis experiment. All that work I just listed brings in money to the university, and none of it is going to help me graduate. I can't write a thesis on all those times I've been woken up in the middle of the night by that pager or all the manual labor I put into Gratina. It's just part of my job. I'm essentially a full-time staff scientist and none of the benefits. That's the position that research assistants are in here in the state right now. We're doing jobs that contribute to the betterment of our institutions, just like other university employees are, and we should be allowed to unionize and to have the same protections that they do. I want to again thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee members for this opportunity to speak on this important issue.
Ms. Mansfield, thank you for sharing the declaration of your member. Are there any questions of Ms. Mansfield? Thank you for testifying today or reading that statement. We do have some cards in support and opposition. These are not individuals who wish to speak. Rachel Richards from the Michigan League for Public Policy supports the bill. Steve Claywell from the Michigan Building Trades supports the bill. Steve Rezeppa from AFSCME Council 25 supports the bill. Steve DeLee from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy opposes. Brian Seabolt from Michigan AFL-CIO supports the bill. And Don Kettinger from the Michigan Nurses Association supports the bill. Next, we're going to hear testimony on House Bill 4231. First, we're going to hear from Representative Hill, who will present her bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much. I am Representative Jen Hill, former college athlete, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on House Bill 4231. We might have other conversations on the floor, however, regarding college athletes. House Bill 4231 would repeal the law banning local municipalities from entering into project labor agreements on publicly funded projects. Project labor agreements, PLAs, have been in use in the United States since the 1930s. They've helped build the Hoover Dam, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, and even Disney World, to name just a few monumental projects. They're a time-tested way to complete projects safely, on time, on budget, in a way that benefits local workers. PLAs establish the terms and conditions of employment with one or more organizations for specific construction projects, typically local ones. With PLAs, contractors, subcontractors, communities, and workers agree to working conditions, ensuring coordination for smooth project completion. PLAs increase economic mobility, not only by ensuring fair wages according to local standards, but also by requiring employee training. These training requirements, coupled with fair compensation, save taxpayers money by ensuring the efficient completion of projects. They also benefit workers who gain new skills and enhance our workforce. PLAs help set a wage floor based on what prevails in a community, ensuring that an influx of taxpayer construction investment doesn't drive down or inflate local wage standards. PLAs discourage unscrupulous contractors from betraying the public trust through inflated profits, lowball bids, cutting corners, or abusive employment practices. These agreements ensure that workers are compensated fairly and prevent jobs from being outsourced to workers who are often less invested in a project's success than community members are. This helps ensure that projects are completed by professionals and adhere to safety standards that save lives. There are real demonstrable differences between the training and quality of union shops and non-union shops that have numerous implications for the quality, cost, and smoothness of a project as it's completed. Giving them a seat at the table improves, having PLAs improves the finished product, provides fair wages, and ensures safety standards. We have had a ban on such time-tested pro-worker forms of agreement. This is counter to the goal of completing public construction projects safely and on time and on budget. That said, I want to be clear on what this bill won't do. This bill does not require municipalities to use public labor agreements. This legislation gives municipalities the freedom to decide what would be best for them. Each municipality would have the right to decide what kinds of jobs they want to support, the wages that are paid to those workers, and the other terms of the projects. Michigan's municipalities are vastly different. A one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work. This legislation simply repeals the 2011 ban and gives municipalities the option to use a PLA. When unions win, workers win. And when workers win, families win. PLAs strengthen union rights, improve the economic prospects of families, and help use taxpayer dollars efficiently. Municipalities should have the option to use them. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on House Bill 4231.
You're welcome. Thank you, Representative Hill. Representative Coons.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Representative. I hope you're in a good mood, Mr. Chair. Give me just a moment. Give me just a moment. Just a moment.
I'll give him some Xanax if he gets out of line.
I am in Lansing because I used to tutor at our local schools. And I saw what good skilled trades jobs could do. My district, the 100th district, is the poorest district in the state of Michigan, the most economically depressed district. And I have two incredible ISDs that have skilled trades training for our high school kids. It's hard for me not to take this bill personally, and I don't think that was your intent. But what you're doing is you are eliminating opportunities for the kids in my district, because unless they are part of this, they cannot get their apprenticeships, right? Unless they are part, absolutely. Unless they are part, they are going to block it, because unless they're part of a collective bargaining agreement, they cannot fulfill their apprenticeship requirements under this law. This is what you're proposing. And again, I'm trying not to take this personally, so I apologize. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chair. I apologize, but that's what this does. It blocks kids from taking their apprenticeship things unless they agree to be part of this union, and that's wrong. So how can you justify taking that from these kids?
I hear you're strongly opposed to this because you have an understanding of what this bill proposes to do. First off, it is voluntary for each community and whether or not they choose to have project labor agreements. So there is no requirement. So therefore, it is up to the local community to decide whether or not they're going to implement this. So that's the first point. On the question of whether local apprentices, what program apprentices come to, it is my understanding that that is something that can be negotiated inside the project labor agreement. So again, it is something that can be negotiated and can be agreed to or not agreed to by the parties of the agreement. What this bill does is simply give this tool back to municipalities.
Would you accept an amendment that regardless of union status, apprenticeships would be welcome on any project? If you want to protect the kids, then meet me on this one.
We can have conversations about amendments at a further time, but I'm not going to negotiate during testimony.
I was hoping we could put the kids forward to this one.
We can talk about that with student athletes.
Thank you, Representative Kuntz. Are there any other questions of Representative Hill? Thank you. Before we hear testimony specifically on this bill, because we got a lot of people who have submitted cards to testify on both this bill and Representative Andrews' bill, we're going to hear from Representative Andrews in relation to House Bill 4237. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to testify. My bill, Bill 4237, would repeal the local preemption law that restricts our local communities from doing any sort of wage setting on businesses within their local communities. Michigan has a long history of home rule. We have over 1,800 individual municipal governments, and one of the things that we as a state really have benefited from is that our municipalities are often incubators of ideas. Our cities and townships get to experiment, they get to try different things, and the rest of our state gets to learn from them. Michigan's a very large state, and oftentimes we find that trying to do blanket legislation is very difficult because things that are good for the UP might not be good for Detroit, might not be good for Southwest Michigan, might not be good for mid-Michigan, et cetera, et cetera. One of the benefits of having a home rule system like we do is that our communities are able to determine for themselves what is best for them. When we preempted local control with what has been affectionately referred to as the Death Star bill, we took away that control from our local communities. Without having that local control, each of our communities prior to this was able to make those determinations for themselves. We know the cost of living can vary dramatically in different communities. In my own district, just recently, there was an MLive article published that was talking about the increases in cost of housing. Of the top 50 communities seeing the largest increases in housing in the state, 7 of them are in my district. Something like 15 of them are in the northwest corner of the state. Those increases in standard of living are being felt acutely by the people who live there, but are being felt in a more acute way than perhaps people who are living in Alpena. Giving our local communities the ability to respond to local pressures gives our communities the ability to prosper on their own terms. It costs more right now to live in the city of St. Joe than it does even its neighboring city of Benton Harbor. So giving those two cities the ability to determine what wages and benefits should look like for people who live and work in their communities gives each of those communities the ability to provide better standards of living. In addition, I represent a border county, and anybody who is from a border county in this state knows the struggle that we have often competing across state lines with Indiana and Ohio. These preemption laws have further tied the hands of our border communities in taking away more tools in their arsenal to fight back against population attrition and various other non-competitive attacks that these border states have inflicted upon us. If we can, in our border counties, offer better wages, better benefits, better standards of living, that gives us the ability to draw people back across the border that we've lost. I'll give an example of this. Currently, the city of New Buffalo, the schools for the New Buffalo area, the superintendent, the high school principal, and I believe the middle school principal all live in Indiana. The reason for that is that they can't afford to live in the community of New Buffalo. If the community there had the ability to set wage and benefit standards, more of our teachers, more of our administrators, more of our workers would be able to afford to move back to our communities, would be drawn back across the state line that they've currently been pushed over by increases in costs of living. Aside from the obvious competitive benefits, this is a way that we can level set for workers in our state. When this act was put into place that took away local control, in the intervening decade, all we've seen is wages stagnate, benefits stagnate, while profits are at an all-time high for most of the corporations and businesses in our state. Clearly restricting and tying the hands of our communities and limiting the ability of our workers to negotiate has not been a net positive. I'll also note that it is much easier to change a local government than it is a state government. If you have an issue with policies that your city, your township, or your county is passing, it's much easier to run yourself for city council or elect or unelect various members of your local cities and townships. So in the event that some of these wage laws were passed that the local community feels are maybe in excess, making a change is much easier than it is to change a state legislature, a governor, a Supreme Court, let alone a federal government or something larger than that. So by giving more control to our local municipalities, by opening the doors for that, we're creating an opportunity for competition between our communities, for ideas to be tried and tested, and also giving back that basic level of local control that's so much more attuned to the needs of each of our citizens. I think that personally, local control is one of the best things that we do here in Michigan. Many court cases that reaffirm our dedication to local control that are in some of the notes that everybody received on the committee this morning. But we shouldn't be tying the hands of our local units of government. We should be giving our cities, our townships, our counties the ability to do what is best for the people that live there and make our state operate the way that it operates best. So thank you.
You're welcome. Are there questions of Representative Andrews? There aren't any. Representative Coons.
Look at all the time we have, Mr. Chairman. Look at all the time we have.
Say that to those who are coming in from, say, Kalamazoo to testify, but hopefully we can get some stuff done.
Thank you, Representative Andrews. Do you consider it a function of local government to set price and wages for private industries?
I don't see why it couldn't be a function of local government to set wages. I mean, the people who live in that community vote in that community. They vote for people to lead their community. So if a city believes that the standard of living is too low for people who live there, then I don't see why the local community shouldn't be able to set a higher standard.
I just wanted to clarify that you wanted the government in charge of wages. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Coons. Thank you, Representative Andrews. So we're going to take testimony in context of some people coming in from a ways out. From those who have come in from a ways out, my expectation is if we don't finish testimony today, we're going to be proceeding on the 22nd or 29th, but stay tuned. First, I'm going to hear from Angela Rogensis from the city of Warren. Good morning.
My name is Angela Rogency, and I am an at-large city council member in Warren, Michigan. I am here in support of House Bills 4237 and 4237.
Excuse me, Ms. Rogency. You need to put your microphone on.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you well. Thank you.
I'll start over. My name is Angela Rogency, and I am an at-large city council member in Warren, Michigan. I'm here in support of House Bills 4237 and 4231, which would restore my ability as a local leader to make decisions for the community that I serve. A few facts that you might not know about Warren. Warren is the third largest city in Michigan with approximately 137,000 residents and the largest city in Macomb County. It is a city that is growing with diversity. The latest census data shows that the city of Warren has nearly 40% of its residents who identify as something other than white. We have vibrant communities of Bengali, Arab, Black, Ukrainian, and Hmong. Children in Warren attend 6 different school districts: Warren Consolidated, Warren Woods, Fitzgerald, Van Dyke Public Schools, Centerline, and East Point schools. Warren still has over 15 miles of dirt roads. Depending on who you talk to on which street, the dirt roads must stay or they must be paved. We are a diverse community of occupations as well. I estimate that 1 in 4 of my residents is a union member. Sanitation workers, firefighters, truck drivers, teachers, nurses, tradespersons, and automotive workers all call Warren home. We are a community of workers. Despite its size, Warren City Council has a reputation for elected leaders and their access. 99% of my residents call my personal cell phone directly when they have an issue or concern. There is an intimacy that those in my community get to experience with their local elected leaders because we are quite literally a phone call or text away. I handle their concerns often personally, visit their homes to look at potholes, blight on their street, a tree that needs repair, or try to help to solve a neighbor-to-neighbor dispute. I know my neighbors and their concerns better than anyone else. I know what they care about, what is important to them, and why. Limiting my ability to make decisions locally or respond to the needs of my neighbors through meaningful legislation makes it far more difficult to represent them. Preemption gives me less tools in my legislative toolbox to get things accomplished for them. We should trust local officials to make decisions that impact our communities, especially when it comes to workers' rights and wages. I know about the issues like dirt roads because Roger is in favor of paving them and Mary is not. I know about our school districts for a variety of reasons, but most recently because a number of families would like to have halal lunch options for their children at school. I know about the diversity of occupations because Jackie is a retired UAW member and never lets me forget it. Lamar is an electrician who came to my city council meeting in support of a responsible contracting ordinance. Jerry is a retired police officer on a fixed income who I last saw at an animal welfare vaccination clinic directing traffic, who is very concerned about the rent in our senior housing complex. I have dozens and dozens of personal stories about my neighbors. I sit at their kitchen table, they sit at mine. I very much know what my community needs. Please restore my ability to govern on one of the most vital things in their lives, their work and their livelihoods. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ms. Rogency. Are there questions of the Warren City Council person? Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious that if you're setting a minimum wage for private businesses and those businesses can't afford to pay their employees because of the increased cost, and then they leave your city and it reduces your tax base, and then the city takes more than it can handle, and then they go into bankruptcy, who ends up paying that in the end? Who bails them out? I mean, you might manage your community good, but there's other communities that don't. We've seen that happen all the time. So when you get upside down, it comes back to the state to bail people out, correct?
I think it would depend.
And that's why we
it would
set
depend
the
on the
minimum wage
issue.
at the state level versus locals, because sometimes locals bite off more than they can chew. And we've seen that with Flint, we've seen it with Detroit, we've seen it in a lot of communities, my community sometimes. So I think you want to be very careful when you do this, because you're going to pit one community against the other, and it's not going to work out very well.
Representative Wagella.
Thank you for your testimony today, and thank you for supporting House Bill 4237, a bill that would allow local governments to do what the state should, such as providing livable wages for their residents if they so choose to, or requiring that. So my question is, what are the benefits for a community and allowing them to have that that self-determination on how they want their residents to thrive, survive in this economy when the state, in my opinion, might be failing workers in some ways?
Thank you. I would say the benefit is the ability to act swiftly, to have a better understanding of the local needs, and make sure that one community over another is able to address workers' wages and a variety of other things based on the needs of that community. I think that's difficult for the state to do, given the diversity of the state and its communities, and it would behoove the community and behoove the local legislators to be able to respond appropriately when housing is increased or affordability of a particular item within a community is much higher than it would be in another community.
And if I may ask a quick follow-up, could you see that as a motivating factor to have more people move to the city of Warren or work in the city, and as a competitive reason for people to be involved with the city that you live in and govern in?
Absolutely. I'm 40. At 42, I'm the youngest on city council, and our city desperately needs younger folks. And any economic opportunity that we could provide, both setting standards of wages or increasing opportunity for younger people to come in and buy homes, would be an incredible opportunity for the city of Warren.
Representative Kuntz.
The city of Warren's pension is currently funded at 65%. If the city of Warren makes bad financial decisions, maybe increases wages beyond what they're sustainable, who ends up paying for that?
So I'm a trustee on the pension system. It's at 65% at the moment, but historically it's been over 70%. The market has taken quite a dip and everyone's portfolio is lower. So 65%, while at the moment may be the exact funding, the pension system is very well funded, both its VEBA and its DBA. In the event that the city of Warren or the pension system cannot meet its obligation, the city of Warren itself would contribute to the pension system to ensure that it's funded. The city of Warren has only in the 4 years I've been on council ever had to contribute any money to our pension system.
I understand. I'm saying if the city of Warren decides to become this mecca and pay unsustainable wages, what happens if the city goes bankrupt? We still have an emergency manager law. What I'm saying is that state taxpayers are going to cover this risk.
No, they will not.
If the city of Warren goes bankrupt, who takes the bill?
The city of Warren is not going bankrupt. We
Okay.
have a AAA
City-
bond rating.
City XYZ. Let's
I can only
be
speak on
absent.
behalf of the city of Warren
Okay.
and its pension system.
I understand. Do you understand it's a hypothetical situation?
Of
If
course I
this
do.
happens.
I'm not going to
So-
speak in hypotheticals.
Outstanding. So we're at 65% and you want more control.
Yes, I want more control
Outstanding.
because I sit on a pension board and I'm well aware of the financials of the pension system.
That we agree is underfunded.
Correct.
Thank you.
Representative Wakella.
So I just want to ask you a question, being that you serve in local government. Would you ever make a decision as a local government official that you knew would bankrupt your own city?
Absolutely.
Or do you think that you're capable and intelligent enough to make decisions for your community that will keep your community safe?
I would never make decisions that would bankrupt my city. I'm a small business owner. I have both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. I've been working professionally for 20 years as an executive and a variety of other capacities. I am very capable of, as a fiduciary of the city and as a trustee of our pension system, to look at our city's P&L and our fund balance and a variety of other items and make decisions around our city's finances and around ordinances and the long-term impact of those ordinances on the city's bottom line.
So just to follow up, giving local governments control of their own cities and how they want to regulate these things does not necessarily mean that they are going to go all bankrupt immediately and then the state is going to have to pick up the slack.
Correct.
Representative Andrews.
Thank you for testifying today. Couple of very short questions. How often are city council races in Warren contested?
Every year.
So you'd say when people are unhappy with the direction they see the city going, they're more than happy to run to replace people and campaign in that way?
I have 10 folks opposing me presently in my election in November, or August rather, for primary.
So hypothetically, if the city was making decisions that were taking it towards bankruptcy, there would probably be upswell to unseat the people who were careening it towards bankruptcy?
Yes, folks in Warren have never been shy about running for office. There are 45 folks running for 10 seats in the city presently.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rogancy. Next, John Taylor, who is chair of the Kalamazoo County Board, speaking in relation to House Bill 4237.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, my name is John Taylor. I'm the chair of the Kalamazoo County Board of Commissioners. I'm speaking in support entirely because of local control. The ability for people closest to the ground, the ability for people that are talking to the residents every single day, that know what their needs and wants are, far more than districts with constituency bases of over 100,000 people. Ours is closer to 25,000 people. We have 9 different commissioners, 9 different ideologies, 9 different perspectives. But each one of our citizen groups or constituency groups elects us to do what's in the best interest of our citizens. We have, just to go back to a previous point, we have a defined benefit plan in Kalamazoo County that's 126% funded. That's unheard of anywhere else in the country. We do that with conservative assumptions on life expectancy and lots of other different topics. But we act in the best interest of our citizens of Kalamazoo County. And what I'm here to say is we as commissioners don't want government like Michigan or state or higher governments to dictate what locals can do. I was first elected county commissioner in 2002, quite a while ago. And the fact that things have changed, in Kalamazoo County, we try really hard to keep our partisanship at the door. As I chair the meetings, I try very, very hard to make sure that national politics, even state politics, don't delineate into our dais, don't come into our conversation, because 99% of what we do is not partisan. But coming to Lansing, and it's kind of interesting that as I am a Democrat, but arguing for local control, if you would have told me that in 2002, I would have said, that's absolutely crazy. That's the Republicans' mantra. That's what they're trying to do. They don't want big government dictating what the wages of their employees have to be, what they have to follow, what they have to do. But now it's come full circle almost, which I find kind of ironic. But I think what I really want, and what I'm speaking for my constituents and for my other colleagues, is the ability to make the decisions for ourselves. The ability for us to talk to our constituents, talk to our residents, and decide what makes sense for them. What do they want to see? And as Representative Andrews said, if they don't like what we're doing, they're going to vote us out. They're not shy in Kalamazoo either of running for office. So, but thank you for the opportunity to testify, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
You're welcome, Commissioner Taylor. Questions? Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming to testify today, Commissioner. So you've served both before and after this preemption was put into place. Been on the board a long time. Was curious if you could think of some situations where local contractors or local businesses may have been negatively impacted by this preemption, preventing the county from setting prevailing wages, et cetera.
Absolutely. We just built a $90+ million courthouse, and we did that without taxpayer money. We didn't bond. We took a long-term strategy approach and saved over decades to come up with that money, and then come up with a revenue stream so that we could pay the rest of the bonding, what we didn't pay down. It took a lot of conservative, hard finance budgeting, and it took members of both sides of the aisle to kind of sit together and come up with agreements on how we're going to do that. And when we finally pulled the trigger back in 2017, 2018 to build this project, it was constantly delayed. We went with a bidding project, and I mean, just recently, a couple weeks ago, there was a fire on it's not completed yet, but there was a fire because an employee that, was not under the standards that we would have liked to have done at the county, was smoking cigarettes on the roof and caused a huge fire. If we have the type of project labor agreements in place that we can dictate that projects are going to be done on time, in budget, we'll have a lot more control, and we'll have the ability to save our taxpayers money.
Thank you. Are there other questions of Chair Taylor? Thank you. Come back. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In this situation, if this law was to be repealed, would you as a county government, would you set the minimum wage for the county, or would that be left up to the individual cities to do that?
Right now, the minimum wage for the county is up to you guys. After the bill that you passed in 2015, you took away that ability from us.
But what I asked is currently, not 2010, I said currently, if this was repealed, would you as a county chair or county board, would you set the minimum wage for the entire county? Or would you delegate that to the local cities and villages?
As one member of the county board, I would certainly entertain discussions as it pertains to project labor agreements and capital projects that we're going to do as a county. But to dictate what local municipalities are going to do, I think that would just be in the same boat as what the 2015 bill was. I can't tell Oshtemo Township or the city of Portage how they're going to treat their employees, but I can, using county tax dollars, decide on major projects that we're going to do what those wages should be.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from another county commissioner, Chokwe Pitchford from Berrien County, Michigan.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to testify this morning. Do I have permission to speak on both bills? That would be
Yes.
4231, 4237. So my name is Chokwe Pitchford. I am a 24-year-old county commissioner from Berrien County. And my background, where I come from, I've been an organizer all my life. I have organized in elections. I have worked in the community. I've been a navigator for a Center for Better Health, where I would help people get connected with jobs, opportunities, resources, trying to rebuild what I call the social fabric of our communities. In a lot of communities, specifically where I come from, like Benton Harbor, that fabric is starting to rip. And we need as much help as possible to put that back together and ensure that our next generation of kids, our next generation of workers have all the tools that they need to go after the American dream and have prosperity. These project labor agreements where government dollars are spent to see workers get paid well and have great benefits. Look, where I come from, it is a point of personal pride to have a job. And I want to make sure it continues to be that way in my lifetime, but I don't want what happened to the last generation to happen to the next. I don't want my children or their children or the workers of today to have to deal with substandard wages, to have to deal with not being able to retire with benefits, not be able to have a pension when they retire. And yes, government is of the people, and the closer to home that it is, the better. So if local governments, counties and cities are setting wages and benefits, that is a good thing because the people elect them. They show up at the municipal meetings. As a county commissioner, I represent Benton Charter Township, which is overwhelmingly Democratic, Hager Township, which is overwhelmingly Republican, and Sodus Township, which is overwhelmingly Republican. I make it to each one of their municipal meetings every single month. Period. Have not missed one yet. I talk to their supervisors, the trustees. I am plugged into what's happening in those townships. They want to see more control be given back to them to make decisions about what's happening in their areas. And yes, this is a good place for the Democratic Party to be, talking about local control, giving control back to municipalities and counties to set standards and wages on agreements that they make. We are a border county in Berrien County, and I am talking in my personal capacity as a county commissioner for District 3. We want to be able to retain the best workers right here in Michigan, right here in some of our communities in Berrien County, because my philosophy is where the workers are, that's where the businesses will go. If you have strong workers, if you have people that are trained in workforce development, plumbing, pipe fitting, electrical work, getting the unions and the trades back into schools, you're going to start to see the workforce develop, and then businesses will have to come to the table and contract and negotiate with counties and municipalities because they have the workforce that these businesses need. We don't have to be one-sided. We can pass legislation for the people and keep passing it. Keep doing things for average, ordinary working people. There is no cap on how much pro-labor work or legislation you can pass. Keep doing it. And the cream of the crop will rise to the top. Yes, competitiveness is a good thing. So having competitiveness between our municipalities, counties, where people are going to go, where jobs are going to go, where you get the best benefits, we're going to have that free market system that we love to talk about right here and be able to sustain and empower our own workers. Thank you for allowing me to testify today, and I'll take any questions.
You're welcome, and thank you for testifying, Commissioner Pitchford. Are there questions? And we do have one from Representative Mueller.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair and Commissioner. This is regarding 4237. So when you look at the city of St. Joe versus Benton Harbor and the disparities in the economic in the region, correct? Yeah. So if St. Joe, whose household median income is $41,000 a year, sets a minimum wage of $20 an hour,
Yep.
and over in Benton Harbor, where the median income is $16,200, and they try to compete with that, what's going to happen with that?
Let me challenge your premise. Why would someone from Benton Harbor not be able to work a job in the city of St. Joe?
They could.
Exactly. It's competitive.
But when your businesses in Benton Harbor lose their employees to St. Joe because they're working in St. Joe because they can pay more, then what are you going to do for a tax base in Benton Harbor?
That is
it was
why-
shown in 2010, Benton Harbor filed bankruptcy, correct?
And that is also why these preemption laws have to go, because of the emergency managers that were put in place that crippled the city of Benton Harbor for years, where people were only able to come to meetings as elected officials, open meetings, and close meetings. The city of St. Joe and the city of Benton Harbor need to be more economically connected. That's the answer here, to stop putting people into silos and islands and act like we have to be divided communities. We don't. Do not pit the city of Benton Harbor against the city of St. Joe. People have done that for 40 or 50 years, and I'm tired of it. We can be one community, and we can all benefit from pro-labor laws.
And that's why we have state minimum wage versus local minimum wage, so we don't do that. Thank you.
Representative Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pitcher, thank you for coming today. I'd hate to delve into a hypothetical, but Benton Harbor did go bankrupt, right? I'm sure their fiduciaries had their best interest in mind. Who ended up picking up the tab on that?
On which part?
When the city of Benton Harbor declared bankruptcy, did they come to the state of Michigan for funding?
I'm sure they did.
Yes, they did. I appreciate when you say local control.
Yeah.
What is the smallest locality? It's the individual, right? Why don't we let the individuals decide this? So I hear you're saying, well, I don't want the state to do it. And we just had a gentleman here who very eloquently said, well, maybe we want the county to do it. And now you're saying, you know what, we should have the city do it. Why don't we stay out of this mess and let the individuals decide what they want to pay, right?
But that's exactly what this law does, because by allowing individuals in their communities who overwhelmingly vote in municipal elections that are usually up every year or every other year, they're going to be able to cast judgment on whether or not their municipality's wage setting standards are correct. The premise is incorrect. It's about putting power back into the hands of individuals and taking it out of the hands of state government, which I think benefits everyone broadly.
Sure. Benton Harbor can pay any wage they want right now, correct?
What does that mean?
What does that, I mean, the question is, if Benton Harbor comes and says, we're going to pay our city employees $100 an hour, could they do that today?
Why do you think they would do that?
Why can't you answer the question?
Because the hypothetical puts my community in the light that says we're not competent enough to be
I'm
able
from
to
the
pay it.
great little town of Clare, Michigan. I hope you come visit someday. Any municipality, now, we're on dangerous hypothetical ground again.
You did
any-
start this hypothetical. I do
Any
wanna say.
municipality can pay their employees any wage they want under the current law. I'm asking.
I'm not sure where this question is going.
I
If
didn't
you're
ask if
asking-
you knew where
let
the
me-
question
Let me
was.
try to
Yes.
answer here.
Please.
If-
It's a simple yes or no. Can they pay what they want?
No.
Really? That's
Because
mistaken.
What your premise is that a municipality is going to go and try to pay $75 an hour to their employees, go into these project labor agreements and try to pay $200 an hour and push businesses out. No one is going to do that. And by devaluing local government to make us seem like we're running around like chickens with our heads cut off, not understanding our communities and the work we want to do, you are devaluing even the people that you represent, because you're saying they're not going to be able to make good decisions unless you have some part of it. And that's not true. I was elected in the same elections probably you were elected. People put trust in both of us, and I'm asking you as the state government to support this legislation so that we can make better decisions locally about what we're going to do looking 10, 20, 30, 40 years into the future in our communities. Because when you're out of office one day because of term limits, some of us will still be in office making decisions in the county and municipal levels.
Correct. I'm
Okay.
trying to get you to acknowledge
Representative
the
Kuntz,
risk.
we're going to move on to another question so we can get everybody a chance to speak who's coming from afar. So, Representative Ogella.
Thank you for your testimony. I think it was extremely valuable. These bills are not about minimum wage, but I think it's been brought into the discussion, so I think it's important to reference it. 2/3 of Americans think that minimum wage should be $15 an hour, and 3/4 of Americans think that the federal minimum wage is too low. So I would bet that there are certain communities that believe that have higher percentages supporting a minimum wage increase, which this bill would allow them to do. On that same conversation, I think it's interesting that some people are arguing that a minimum wage increase in a neighboring city would hurt that of a different neighboring city, especially when you consider probably people in St. Joe, there's a much lower percentage of people working for minimum wage than in Benton Harbor. And when you raise that standard of living for people in general, that raises it for everybody else. So I guess my question is, under this bill, where we could see these bills, I should say, which we could see, increased safety conditions, higher wages, clarity in projects, do you see that benefiting everybody in the state of Michigan, in your point of view?
Yes, it benefits everyone in the state of Michigan. And one thing I do want to add to my comments I made earlier is when you have certain municipalities that'll go into contract with these project labor agreements, they're also going to have the ability now to say, hey, we want to make sure people from our area are also working these jobs that are coming in. We want to make sure that our residents feel the impact of these multi-million-dollar projects that come in and put up apartment complexes and all the things that we do in county and state government to try to move our communities forward. Our communities should feel the impact of that, but they should also be able to get a standard and quality of living out of that that's commensurate with what they deserve. My entire testimony today is talking about the fact that average, ordinary people deserve a hand up. They want to work, they want to do these jobs, but I'm sick and tired of being in my community and hearing people saying, I'm trying to make it on $12 an hour and I can't do it. They're working 40 hours a week and they cannot make it. And anything that we can do to help empower the people in this state that pay taxes, we should be doing.
Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. We've been focusing a lot on the minimum wage section of this, but this repeal would actually open up a lot of other options for our municipalities too. Working at the Center for Better Health, and plug for the Center for Better Health that our Corewell Health System puts on, it's an amazing service. I believe you would have probably seen a lot of people coming in with single-parent households, single moms, lots of kids, who fell on hard times because of sickness or something related to that. And one of the things that this would enable municipality to do is to set sick leave standards and paid parental leave standards. And I'm in your experience working in that system and the people that you interacted with, how much of a difference do you believe those sorts of policies would make in those people's lives?
Give you a perfect example. If the city of Benton Harbor was able to set sick leave standards and said that you could have 5 days a year, let's just throw that number out there. There are at least 24 people that came through my office that would have kept their jobs. There were instances where someone was actually sick with terminal illnesses multiple times back to back, but because of their position in the company, because of what they did, they were considered expendable. And they were immediately fired and came to my office asking for help, saying, I'm being evicted tomorrow. I don't have any idea how to work through the legal system. The social fabric or the social safety net that I'm talking about was not able to catch this person. So we were there until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, calling every shelter, calling every group that helped out with bills or rent, trying to figure out how to get this person help. If these protections were in place, it would have been conversations with city government. It would have been conversations with city officials. What can we do to prevent this from happening again? What can we do to make our municipalities bastions of economic prosperity, democracy at a minimum? That's at least what this is setting up, that they're able to make decisions that best inform and help their residents. And we have not seen the state of Michigan and its economic prosperity with these types of legislations in place. Let's give it a try. We've tried everything else the last 40 or 50 years. Let's give it a try, actually giving working people a hand up.
Thank you, Commissioner Pitchford. Marcus Keach from the Grand Rapids Chamber and Amy Drum from the Michigan Retailers Association will be joining him. They are speaking on House Bill 4237.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am Marcus Keach, Director of Government Affairs for the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. Today I'm joined by Amy Drum, Senior VP of Government Affairs for the Michigan Retailers Association. The Grand Rapids Chamber supports businesses of all sizes as we work to create a thriving and prosperous West Michigan for all. Our team works every day engaging businesses and local government, helping them navigate regulations and permitting, and advocates on their behalf. House Bill 4237 and the repeal of the Local Government Labor Regulatory Limitation Act is bad for business and bad for Michigan. There are more than 1,800 separate local units of government in the state, and this would give each the power to develop their own vastly different set of regulatory policies. Business competitiveness could be significantly different based on which side of an often arbitrary line they operate in. Businesses benefit greatly from regulatory certainty and consistency, none more than small and minority-owned businesses. Across the country, states agree that the best business practice is to have a uniform set of regulatory policies that will encourage economic growth. But with this legislation, economic development will have to face another significant hurdle. Just 2 weeks ago on Mackinac Island, the governor and legislative leaders unveiled Make It in Michigan. This policy before you potentially will instead lead to making it anywhere other than Michigan. Businesses will not have the confidence in our system to create an environment where businesses can grow and expand and advancing the skilled workforce within it. We must not create a system of uncertainty that is dependable on the ever-evolving and unpredictable landscape of local governments, and businesses should not be left to interpret the more than 1,800 differing regulatory bodies as they look to work throughout Michigan. I encourage you to oppose House Bill 4237, and I'd like to now turn it over to Amy from the Retail Association.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Amy Drum, and I'm the SVP of Government Affairs for Michigan Retailers Association. And I appreciate the opportunity to share our concerns today with House Bill 4237 and why we oppose the Employment Uncertainty Act. I want to be clear that I'm not here today to talk about the merits of any one specific policy or benefit this bill would open up at the local level. We instead believe the crux of this issue before you is a question of who should have jurisdiction over regulations related to the employment relationship. As an association, the majority of our members are small, family-owned businesses like grocery and shoe stores, and we also represent some retailers with statewide or national footprints. Retail is directly responsible for more than 500,000 jobs in Michigan at over 86,000 Michigan locations. And on behalf of all of our members, we consistently advocate for simple, fair rules and equal treatment. Our retailers operate tens of thousands of locations across the state, many in desirable city downtowns or shopping centers. Retail is an industry of opportunity. It offers many workers their first job and the ability to learn critical skills that help them in their future careers, whether that is continuing and moving up in retail or moving on to another industry itself. Michigan's retailers learned quickly how difficult it can be to comply with different rules and regulations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Counties adopted differing and sometimes conflicting health screening requirements and mask mandates. These were adopted with little notice before they were implemented. Retailers and employees worked hard to safely remain open to ensure that families had the supplies they needed, despite these frequently changing rules. That uncertainty and confusion is not the kind of environment we want to see replicated post-pandemic. We've seen similar challenges with local ordinances in other states. It is often the details and the different requirements, definitions, and record keeping that quickly become complex to administer and can be contrary even between neighboring communities. Small business owners who, in addition to making the larger businesses' decisions of which products or services to sell or offer, must also serve in compliance, hiring, HR, accounting, and sometimes even cleaning roles. And they may not even know that the regulation change is being considered or has happened. They have limited time and resources to meet every new regulation, benefit requirement, or compliance demand. Now imagine if those rules changed monthly, as local units of government could adopt additional policies they must follow, which is exactly what House Bill 4237 would allow. Running a business, even if it's your dream, is hard. Most small retailers are still recovering from the pandemic, and one key step in their continued recovery is maintaining that certainty that businesses with more than one location won't potentially be subject to a patchwork of wage and benefit policies that could create a compliance nightmare. The reason our association and members supported the 2015 law is because we feel strongly that if employment relationships are going to be regulated beyond existing state or federal law, the state legislature, and all of you, is the appropriate place for those decisions to be debated. Now with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and appreciate again the time to share our concerns with you today.
Representative Churches.
Thank you for being here today. So I just want to, I hear what you're saying, And I understand that you represent a variety of business models, and I appreciate that. We have been doing things this way for decades, and what I'm hearing from my constituents and my supervisors and my mayors is they can do it better. And as a school teacher, if I did everything the same for every student, the students wouldn't get what they needed because that's just life. Not every kid is the same. Not every person has the same needs, the same skill sets. If you look at our state in a similar way, you would say not every mayor or supervisor or commissioner or person or county, city, village, township has the same needs, has the same things that they look to and value. So by saying that every worker gets the same exact amount of money, we would say that everyone has the same experience, the same housing costs, all of those things. If we give this privilege to our townships and local control, and we say we are trusting the people of that place to vote these representatives to advocate for them on their behalf, I would say that is a representation of what people need, and it is saying, almost in a way, our legislature has failed our state by not providing those things, not giving people enough. That is what I'm hearing as a representative of my community, because I serve people that don't have enough money to pay for their housing when we have increasing costs. And our state legislature isn't moving fast enough to provide the needs of those people. And I heard you say something, you can't move or your businesses can't move and meet the needs because these might change monthly. That is maybe a possibility, but why would a city, township, or village do something flippantly to hurt or not be thoughtful in what impacts their community? Because would you say that a township or a representation of those people would want their small businesses to be successful? Do you think their best interest is also in the best interest of your businesses? Would you agree that a representation cares about how businesses do in their districts?
I don't want to presume here that I was certainly not making the assumption that local governments don't care about their communities and local businesses. I certainly believe that they do. Our concern is the unintended consequences. We think these issues are best handled at the state level. Frankly, we think the employer and the employee are the best ones to make these decisions ultimately, but if they're going to be regulated, we already have state and federal laws that protect workers. We believe that debate is best handled at the state level, so we don't have unintended consequences. Details truly matter in these issues. They become very complex very quickly, and we respect that locals want to be more involved, but also respectfully, all of you were elected to have that opportunity to bring their concerns to the state level and have the discussion here, and that's where we think it's best handled.
What would you say to someone like me who has constituents reach out to them saying that what we're doing for workers, they need more than what we have currently?
I understand that there's other legislation that we're not debating today that may seek to do that, and that would be your purview to introduce other bills and have those discussions here.
And if I may chime in and not sound like a broken record, as we're not here discussing an opposition of specific policies, but more who serves as that regulatory authority. The Grand Rapids Chamber and our 2,500 members, we do serve also many of our local school districts as well. And we have heard from a handful of those that also have concern on this legislation, whether it's your local school districts as well as your higher education institutions as well. They do also have concerns on this piece of legislation due to the ever-changing potential regulatory policies. As we do look at 1,800 different local governing bodies, you do risk, as we've heard in previous questions and answers, that if the residents are not a fan of how policy determined, they can re-elect or vote out certain members, and by doing that, it just creates a system where every year or two or three policies can change, and it's not favorable to businesses in a good business environment to have policies changing continuously as they're trying to navigate, potentially, if they serve across different governing body lines, varying policies that could very well be changing every couple of years.
So I'm also elected every 2 years. So it's the same at the state level. But I would say we give the people the choice to say and use their voice and exercise it in the way that our government gives them that opportunity. So that is just saying we are giving our people a voice, and we are holding these entities accountable and listening to those voices.
I appreciate your comments, and I'm more than happy to talk more about that.
Thank you.
Time.
Representative Wagella.
So my question is pretty similar to Rep. Church's, but I'll maybe just ask it one more time just for clarity. In the testimony, there was conversation about laws changing monthly, which I think is maybe an unfair part of the testimony, and also I question if it's even true, right? I mean, like, theoretically, the state could change laws every single day that we're here, but we don't, because that's not logical, nor is there any record of that actually happening. So I guess I'm really asking, like, is there any evidence to support that claim? And two, you know, what motivation would there be to do that? If that's part of the crux of the argument, that's lost on me, because I feel like, you know, we have term limits at the state level. There's actually probably more change coming from a state level than at a local level. In some cases, local officials serve for years. I know most people, at least in my local cities, are on council for sometimes 20, 30 years. You can't do that at the state level. So I guess they're just challenging that premise and maybe looking for a further explanation.
So I appreciate the question, Representative. I think what I was trying to get at with that statement was that if you have a business with multiple locations, you could be subject to multiple different changing regulations within varying localities. We've also seen in other communities in other states where you adopt one policy and then you move on and you adopt the next policy. And I'm not saying that it would be, you know, April and then May and then June, but that if you have multiple jurisdictions, you have that capability, and multiple locations, you could see that one adopts one and then they move on to the next one and the next one. And again, we are talking about asking for certainty and clarity, and we are concerned about the confusion that would happen for small business owners who are trying to comply with multiple different jurisdictions who are adopting multiple new policies that, again, we feel are best regulated at the state level.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, what do you think, in your opinion, the landscape would be if you had two competing businesses that are, you know, in an open market, free market atmosphere? You know, someone moves in, and let's say on 8 Mile, right? So you have one business on one side of the road, one business on the other side of the road, and we enact this, and this gets repealed. What you have two competing businesses, but two very different regulatory, you know, concerns with minimum wage standards. What's going to happen to the one business that's across the street? And think of it this way too, like from a realtor standpoint, or someone that has rental properties per se, right? And they have employees, they have rental properties all over the Metro Detroit area. And so, you know, maybe in Ecorse they have to pay $17 an hour. Detroit, they're paying $20 an hour. Redford, they're paying $13 an hour. How is that going to work out in the long run?
With the hypothetical, I think that you open up the opportunity for, depending on the jurisdiction that each of those competing businesses are in, it's a matter of expansion within the least of regulatory policies in place, and then risking the employers that are in the higher regulatory policy jurisdiction to not be able to operate, to potentially lay off people, close doors, and potentially move. And so you ultimately open the doors open for, as municipalities get into a competitive nature of what those regulatory policies look like, those larger employers will have to be faced with the difficult decision of how their operational policies look. So I hope that answers your question.
Correct. So basically, when a small business leaves one area to go to the other, then that community loses tax base, which also then they can't pay their employees more. They can't provide public service. They can't provide police, fire, and that kind of stuff, correct?
Yeah, and I would say on behalf of the small businesses side of things, and as Amy testified, it's not a matter of small businesses moving to a different municipality. They don't have that same flexibility. It's more that larger businesses might have the ability to do that just because they have capital. It's more for their sake of closing their doors and not being able to operate, and then the state as well as the local municipality loses that tax base.
Similar to Whirlpool leaving Benton Harbor.
All right. Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Still proud to host the headquarters of Whirlpool in Benton Harbor. Thank you very much. My parents were small business owners. They had 3 locations, one in Benton Harbor, one in Niles, one in Three Rivers. And in each of those locations, there was often differences, albeit sometimes minor, in how much wages were being paid, hours were being set, that sort of thing, because each community was distinct, and the standard of living in each community and the competition between others in their business sector set different standards and wages. I'll note that all this does is allow municipalities to set a floor in the same way that the current minimum wage sets a floor. Businesses can always adjust above and beyond what's set as a floor, much the way my parents' business found they had to do to stay competitive. So given that the nature of small business is that you're always making adjustments to be competitive and to stay competitive in the field that you're in and the location that you're in, I'm trying to understand how this would make any real difference for small businesses that are already doing that, other than possibly making it difficult for people who are not meeting standards and paying their people well. I'm trying to understand how this is different, how this the indecisive environment that you're describing is any different than what small business owners operate in every day, when all we're saying is let municipalities set a floor for a standard of living and benefit that the people in their municipality need to survive.
I think, Representative, your first comment made our argument that employers are already doing that to retain and attract talent the best that they can. They're following the rules that exist at the state level, and they're setting wages and benefits to meet their employees' needs where they can and are able to. But they have that flexibility now to decide which benefits their employees want and need. And our concern is not necessarily so much on the specific benefit that may be required, but sometimes it is the details of the policy in terms of the record keeping, the enforcement, the definitions of who is included or not included being changed from one community to another. So again, we are talking about complex, detailed ordinances that we often see that may be well-intentioned and may be sometimes beneath what the current benefits offered are. But it becomes that compliance that can be the challenge. And again, that's why we want one standard and certainty, and we believe these issues should be handled at the state level rather than in the possible 1,800 different local government units.
You're already admitting that they have to respond to local concerns and competitive environments locally anyway, which can vary dramatically from community to community, and only 1% of Michigan workers make minimum wage right now anyway. So it seems like a lot of this is like hypotheticals to drum up fear and not so much things that are grounded in reality, I guess.
If I can just say something, and that's when we start talking about our local businesses, our employers, small and large, that operate across municipal lines into multiple townships, cities, villages, you enter into this confusion of having to interpret multiple regulatory policies across lines. And so depending on where your employees live or work on a given day in potentially the trades, if you operate in one municipality one day and the next a different day, it opens this confusion of what's the wages, what's the regulatory policies that have to be implemented based off where they're working. Are you basing it off where the headquarters is located, or are you basing it off of where they actually are doing their job for that day? And so there's a lot of confusion where if the state is the regulatory body that oversees this, then you don't have to worry about those arbitrary lines.
Representative Kuntz, and let me tell you, we have to be moving with alacrity right now because of the time. We have several committee members who may need to leave to go to other committee meetings. I do want to get Portia Perry on the stand yet because she may be coming from some distance. I apologize, City Council from Lansing, Garza, that I tried to get you on, and we'll try to get you next week or the week after. Go ahead. Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be very brief. You talked about patchwork rules. You talked about continuity. We could bring up examples, just sitting here, employees that work at multiple locations. Well, what happens if I work from home? What happens if the business has a mailing address in a different district where I'm working? This is a regulatory nightmare, and thank you very much for bringing that up. My question, very simple, Mr. Chairman, if local control is the best, and I'm so glad to hear my esteemed colleagues are now on the local control board, should we have local right-to-work laws?
I think that points a significant question that you all can debate and discuss.
Yeah. It was voted down, by the way, when that came up.
Ms. Drummond, Mr. Keach, thank you. Ms. Portia? Do you have enough time to say what you want to say, or will you need to come back next week? Okay, we're going to give it to you. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Heisman and community members. My name is Portia Perry. I am a member of SEIU Local 1. I am a mother of 2 wonderful girls, and I live currently in Detroit. I'm here today in support of HB 4237 because workers in our communities are struggling. Local communities should have the power to decide what's best for us, and the local leaders we elect should be able to help raise wages and improve conditions for workers. As an essential worker, we're on the front line, and we have to deal with everyday struggles. We have to come in and do multiple jobs for others when we're short. I believe that this will help with wages and help with our communities. Every day that we have to take off from work for medical or grievance, we don't get paid for it. We have to make that decision on, should I go to work or should I take off to go to the doctor, the dentist, and that's a income that we're losing. Also, like, it's so many members, it's so many community members out here that's dealing with everyday struggles. I'm pretty sure, like, you all have dealt with it once upon a time in your life as well. By Indian state pre-exemption laws, we can give power back to our communities and local leaders we select to help create the good jobs that our families need. Every worker, no matter their job title, zip code, or race, deserves to be respected and pay a livable wage so we can take care of our families and our health. Please support workers like me and repeal state pre-exemption laws that are holding back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Are there any questions? Thank you. And again, we'll get the rest of you next week or the 29th, whichever is the date by which we're able to proceed. We are now adjourned. I don't think we have any absent members, so there's no further business before the House, and we're off.